Hello everybody and welcome to another video talking about Oscar predictions. Now, technically speaking, it has been more than a month since my last update, and that I apologize for that. There's a lot of things going on in my life right now, including we're moving, among other things that I don't want to get into, but things have been pretty hectic, and also I've been on a bit of a depressive slump for various reasons, but I am now finally making a video 1 month later on an update. And it is funny because when the month started, I remember thinking to myself, not that much has changed. How am I going to do an Oscar predicting video? But then the festival started happening, and then we immediately got a whole bunch of word on a bunch of interesting movies. And so now I think we actually have a much clearer idea of what's going to be in contention and what's not going to be in contention. So I'm willing to bet that we did make some pretty serious changes, and I'm willing to bet that these changes are going to be very indicative of what's going to happen, what's actually going to get nominated. Like, these changes are going to be for the better. So let's not waste any time and start with Best Documentary Feature. From the top 5, I took out Street Gang, How We Got to Sesame Street, and went with Attica, because I believe that's a more... I forget what that one's even about, but from what I heard about it, I was like, oh, this is definitely an awards-friendly documentary. Hearing some very interesting stuff about some of these, like Burning and In the Same Breath, which is COVID-related, and I wonder if it'll be too soon or just timely enough. But Flea is what's really interesting, because Flea is an animated foreign language documentary that I am predicting to be nominated in all 3 categories. And from what I hear, it's gotten so much praise. And some people are saying, if it gets nominated in animated foreign language and documentary, who's to say it can't also be nominated in Best Picture? And that, I think, is a bit of a leap to make, having not seen the film, because no documentary has ever been nominated for Best Picture, and only 3 animated films have ever been nominated, and they were all Disney. So it seems like a real stretch that Flea could be a Best Picture nominee, but anything is possible. So I don't have it in right now, but I have it just outside the top 15. We will see what happens. So moving up from documentary into international feature, we see Flea again, as well as Parallel Mothers, The Hand of God, and The Worst Person in the World, and Petite Maman. I moved out A Hero because I think that one got solid reviews, but not the kind of reviews that people were hoping for. I'm not really sure what the quote-unquote front-runner in this category is right now. But I had Worst Person in the World, now I have Parallel Mothers, it's Pedro Almodovar, and that's a lot of prestige going into that one. But I will say Petite Maman is, I believe, from the director. Is it from the director? I think it's from the director who did the portion of A Lady on Fire, which was France's should have been Oscar submission from 2019, and was a very talked about movie, but didn't end up getting nominated. And in the end, so now this is looking like it'll be the contender. But Titane, which is another big deal, won the Palme d'Or at Cannes. It's another film from France. So there's a question of what movie France is going to submit. From what I hear, Titane is great, but it might be too weird for the Academy's taste. And if it does make the shortlist, expect it to be nominated. But we don't know if France is going to pick it. So not much else to say outside of that. But some very intriguing titles done by directors that are very prolific. I wonder if we're going to get something that comes completely out of nowhere, but, well, maybe The Worst Person in the World is not as prolific as some of the others, but, very, very interesting category, to say the least. And now we move to Best Animated Feature, and, I feel very, very confident in the top 5. I see no immediate reason why the top 5 would change, because you've got 3 Disney movies, and you've got Flea, which I already talked about, and Mitchell's vs. the Machines, which has gotten all this insane love. And I'm still gonna predict Mitchell's for the win because it has so much passion behind it. Still, I mean, Mitchell's has managed to hold on to the passion a lot better than Raya and the Last Dragon, which is a shame because Raya is also a great movie. But Raya came out at the very, very beginning of the eligibility window before last year's Oscar nominations were even announced, and it would not surprise me if some Oscar voters mistakenly believe that Raya came out last year. So Disney is gonna need to push Raya, and hopefully they do, to remind people, hey, this movie was this year and it is great. But if Encanto is really, really good, then they could just put all of their chips behind Encanto and leave Raya out to dry. So we don't really know. But I feel, at the moment, I feel fairly confident in these top five. Vivo I have not actually seen but have heard very good things about, so it could sneak in and get that sixth spot. And also have not seen Paw Patrol, but people are like, hey, this is surprisingly good. For a movie aimed at 6-year-olds, it does the job very well, and sometimes totally harmless kids movies do get nominated in this category, like Ferdinand, so it's not entirely impossible, but I think the top five right now is a little bit too solid to see anything seriously coming up from underneath it. But okay, with all that being said, let's move on to Best Sound, just one category like it was last year. And okay, so there's a lot of things to talk about with this one. I'm going to try to talk about each movie as we get to it. But Dune, I think, is going to be the frontrunner here, and in a lot of the tech categories, from what we're hearing, it's like the new Lord of the Rings. It's so epic and so big, and it does the job so well. Don't Look Up, I've moved up a bit here, and as we'll get to later, I think Don't Look Up is going to be a big, big contender in a lot of categories. And then Nightmare Alley, we got the trailer for that, and that really looks like Guillermo del Toro going all out. We still have to wait for reviews, but I think it's going to be a big player, and it's clearly being positioned to be a big player. So it's going to do well here. This is one of the few categories where I still have Eternals, and I think it's the only category where I still have In the Heights. So Eternals has moved down quite a few pegs because I think more exciting movies have moved up, and I'm like, okay, Eternals. I was excited for it at the beginning of the year because I'm like, oh, Chloe Zhao is doing it, but I do think it's going to be a little... We've gotten so much Marvel content this year that some people are honestly a little bit marveled out. And WandaVision was a big Emmy nominee, but I think WandaVision benefited from being the first big Marvel thing after a long drought. And at this point, we've gotten so much Marvel, it might be a little bit too much, and Eternals is not going to have that same factor. And In the Heights, I'm still holding on to hope that In the Heights could be a contender. Too many people have completely written off because of its box office performance, but if people remember it by the end of the year, I could very easily see it making a comeback. As of right now, I only have it getting nominated in this one category, but I do have it like in the 6 through 10 period in some other categories, so keep an eye out for that. And then Out of Sync, I have just missing. So from what I understand, this is a horror film about a character who starts to experience sound out of sync, and the film does some very unique things with sound that could be very similar to Sound of Metal. From what I've heard, the film itself is not the best, but the sound itself is really unique. So it could contend just based on that, but I don't know how well the movie has to do outside of that, but don't write it out. Don't write it out. And Quiet Place, of course, is there. Belfast. Okay, it's time to finally talk about Belfast. So for the record, I knew about the existence of this film for a long time, and I don't think I ever once mentioned it in an Oscar prediction video. And the reason I never mentioned it in an Oscar prediction video is because this is Kenneth Branagh, in Kenneth Branagh's last movie was Artemis Fowl. And that was all the justification that I needed to not include it in an Oscar prediction video. I mean, Kenneth Branagh, if you look at the movies that he's made this decade, Thor, Cinderella, Murder on the Orient Express, and now Death on the Nile, like, they're not terrible, but they're not things that contend for awards in a major way. And so, and with Artemis Fowl being as bad as it was, I remember thinking, oh, Kenneth Branagh has just lost his touch. And when I heard about this movie, I remember thinking, this sounds like a This Had Oscar Buzz movie. It sounds like the director is trying too hard to make an Oscar-friendly movie and it's not going to work. I was very pessimistic about it, largely because of how bad Artemis Fowl was. And so when the reviews came out of the festivals, it really got my attention, and then of course it won the Audience Award at TIFF, which, just in case you don't know, that's very, very important. In the 11-ish years, 12 years that the Best Picture lineup has been expanded, only once has the audience winner at TIFF missed a Best Picture nomination. So winning the Audience Award at TIFF is very important for being in the Best Picture conversation, so I feel like I kind of have to include Belfast. And so House of Gucci is still here, but has moved down significantly. I really thought it was going to be a big awards contender from the trailer, but after hearing what a lot of people are talking about, it seems like it's more of a commercial play. So I don't have it doing as well, but I still have it picking up on a couple of nominations. So I have it just on the outskirts, but if it's really good, it could still make a comeback. And then The Matrix Resurrections, I'll talk about more in the visual effects race, but that trailer really did capture a lot of people's attention, and it could be one of the big blockbusters of the year, which means a sound nomination is not out of the question. Okay, so Best Original Song is starting to become a little clearer, but you can never really tell with this category until you get really close. I still have Encanto as the placeholder number one, but we have not heard any of the music. We've heard a little bit of the music in the trailer, but we don't know what song was going to be the one that's pushed. No Time to Die, obviously, people have heard plenty in advance, but is that even coming out? It keeps getting pushed off. King Richard, it's funny, way, way, way back, I think I said something about King Richard feels like the sort of movie that would have a song in it that would get pushed. And sure enough, I was right, and there is an end credit song, and it's by Beyonce, so that's all the reason I need to predict it. Honestly, maybe I should make it number one. I'll leave it number 3 for now. The Anonymous Ones is going to be the big push for Dear Evan Hansen. Having heard it now, it's a great song, and I have removed Dear Evan Hansen from the rest of my predictions because other people who have seen the film now are not super crazy about it. People like it fine, and I think I'm going to really like it, but it's not for everybody, and that's okay. But I do think the Anonymous Ones can seriously contend because it is a great song. And then West Side Story, speaking of musicals, West Side Story this is the only place I think West Side Story is going to get nominated, and call me crazy, but I just don't think West Side Story is going to do as well as everyone else thinks it will, because this movie does not need to exist. We have the original West Side Story, and the only reason to do it again is to fix controversial casting choices with casting white actors in non-white roles, but then what do? You do controversial casting choices with Ansel Elgort. So either way, just, you know what, I can appreciate that the casting choices in the original West Side Story were not perfect, but outside of that, it's still a great movie that holds up really well to this day. You can watch a movie from 1961. It's okay. It's frustrating that I just don't think this movie needs to exist, and I don't think that people are really... I don't think it's going to be a big deal. Maybe it can be a contender in costume design, production design, but it's not... I don't think it's going to do anything above the line. And there probably will be an original song that contends here. So we have another musical, Annette. So maybe start. That's a song that we've heard already, and I've heard the film itself is clearly not Academy material from the people who've seen it, but that song definitely does stick in your head, and people do like the Sparks Brothers, so this is definitely possible. And there's a Lady Gaga song for Top Gun Maverick, but I've taken that out now. And the rest are just placeholders. I'm as confident as I can be in the top 5, but still, anything can happen with this category, so be prepared for anything. So, now on to the other music category, Best Original Score. Those who have seen Dune say that Hans Zimmer's score is amazing, so I'm confident with that in number 1 position. Nicholas Britell is doing Don't Look Up, so I have that at number 2. And Desplat is doing Nightmare Alley, and Johnny Greenwood is doing both Power of the Dog and Spencer. So I'm confident in those guys getting on, but I do think Luca and Tragedy Macbeth and The Green Knight are close, because the first two, with Luca and Green Knight, people have heard those scores and have really good things to say about them, and Tragedy Macbeth is Carter Burwell. I'm not sure if Mika Levy is the person that does the score. Not Burwell. Mika Levy did the score for Power of the Dog and Spencer. No, Johnny Greenwood. Sorry, I'm getting confused. Johnny Greenwood is doing both. And people really like Johnny Greenwood and haven't had a lot of opportunities to award him, so this is going to get on for one of them. Oh, and I should probably mention Licorice Pizza. This is the first mention of that film, technically, except, Licorice Pizza is the film that was formerly known as Soggy Bottom, and it's Paul Thomas Anderson, and I had Soggy Bottom in all my previous predictions, but it was always the untitled Paul Thomas Anderson movie, and Soggy Bottom was just the placeholder name that we thought they were going to go with, but in the end they went with Licorice Pizza. So I'm just saying that now. If you see Licorice Pizza and it says +1 or -1 and you think I didn't see it before, I'm just changing the title from Soggy Bottom to Licorice Pizza, but the placement still stands. And I don't know how well it's going to do. I think it's going to be a lot of pre-existing music, but we'll see. So now on to Best Visual Effects. Okay, so Dune is looking like it's going to be your contender. And The Matrix 4 looks like it's going to be a big contender too. Judging from that trailer, it looks pretty incredible, the effects that they're doing. Don't Look Up is a new addition to this category, but I have it in because it's a Best Picture contender that might have some VFX stuff in it. And obviously we have Dune, but any Best Picture contender with some subtle effects, with the space stuff in the movie, we don't know how much of it is going to be space stuff, but I think it can be just enough that it's going to contend, but we will wait and see. And honestly, it's a little bit difficult to figure out what this category is going to be yet. We do have a lot of blockbusters, but it's actually formulating a solid 5 is difficult. I do still have Eternals nominated here. I'm so sorry. I do still have Eternals nominated here. And then Suicide Squad, I think is going to make it on because people really like that movie. But Free Guy is just below that. I think that could do really well. All of these are in an interesting position. Shang-Chi was originally much higher, and then I took it out because it seemed like the effects are actually people's least favorite thing about that movie. So we will wait and see. And I do have Clifford the Big Red Dog on the list now because I think it's possible, even though the movie, technically speaking, does not have a proper release date. But from what we know, the movie is done, and I think it would seem ridiculous to not release it in some form on streamings before the end of the year. So I feel like it could make it, and the Academy does like movies with CGI animals in this category. One and Only Ivan made it last year, and then Christopher Robin a little while back. This feels plausible. But anyway, let's move on to Best Makeup and Hairstyling. And this is really interesting. So, for the longest time, I had House of Gucci in a number 1, but as you'll notice, House of Gucci is moving down a lot in general predictions. I don't think it's going to be as big an awards contender as we thought it was going to be. And so I now have Eyes of Tammy Faye, because that makeup transformation that we've seen in the trailers really is spectacular, and it's very eye-catching makeup. This feels like a strong contender for a winner in this category. And then House of Gucci is behind it. And then we also have Dune, which I think is going to give us a lot of cool opportunities for makeup. And outside of that, Cruella and Spencer, that are both more hairstyling than anything else. But it's a little bit hard to tell with this category. No Time to Die, we know they're doing some interesting things with Rami Malek's face, which I included it, but I was worried it might be a bit too subtle. And all the rest of these films, I really don't know. Last Night in Soho is mentioned here, but I don't think gets a ton of mentions anywhere else, because that movie, from the reviews we got, it's not as good as we were hoping it might be. And apparently it takes some turns in the second half of the film that people don't really like. So it's clearly not an Academy-friendly thing, so I don't have it nominated for anything. This might be the only mention of it, or it might show up in costumes, I forget. And then Eternals and Suicide Squad. We're not really sure with this category. I at least feel confident that Eyes of Tammy Faye and House of Gucci are going to be big contenders. And Dune makes sense. But everything else is really up in the air. Best Costume Design. So, I still have Cruella at number 1. And I think Cruella's going to stay number 1 for a while, because people are still talking about the costumes in that movie. Nightmare Alley moves to 2, and House of Gucci moves to 3. And with Dune at 4 and Power of the Dog at 5, this all makes really good sense as a category. French Dispatch I moved out of the top 5, because even though the costumes in that are very vibrant, I don't know how well the movie overall is going to be liked, and so people might be willing to move past it very quickly, even though I think I still have it number 1 in a different category. And Belfast, I think the costumes in Belfast might be a bit too subtle, but then again, it is a period piece, so anything is possible. Spencer, I'm torn between, because I'm like, how many times can you keep doing royal outfits? And it seems like largely, I don't know if the outfits are going to be so elaborate compared to some of these other costumes. But again, anything is possible. And then Tragedy Macbeth and Licorice Pizza. So we will see. We will certainly see. Next up is Best Production Design, and I do have French Dispatch at number 1. Nightmare Alley, though, that trailer, French Dispatch, people said, oh, there's no way this loses because the production design is so elaborate, but Nightmare Alley, from what we've seen in that trailer, oh man, there's a lot of very eye-catching production design in that. And then Dune is a lot of world building, so that's a very solid top 3. It's going to be interesting to see how it works. But Power of the Dog, from what we've seen, looks good. And it's going to be a Best Picture contender, so the production design, I think, is going to stand out. And then Tragedy Macbeth, I think this is one of the few things... I'm not going to say that now. So far, this is the first mention of it. I think there's a couple more later on. But all the rest of them are like, maybe, I don't know. Last Duel makes sense as a lone production design nominee, but I'm not sure I'm ready to fully commit to that yet. And then the rest, not much else to say. I think I've covered a lot of my opinions on these films earlier. Best Cinematography. So, Power of the Dog, from what we've seen in that trailer, looks pretty incredible. And then Tragedy Macbeth and Belfast are both black and white. And Nightmare Alley and Dune are very visually appealing. Spencer is going to come close. There's a couple of categories here where I felt a very strong top 6, and I feel bad for the movie that made it in the number 6 position. In this case, it's Spencer. But the top contenders look very, very promising on paper, and we just have to guess which one is going to be the one to fall through. And in this case, I said Spencer, because there's some debate about how popular Spencer is going to be with the Academy overall. Spencer, I don't think I've mentioned this yet, but Spencer is doing a lot better than we thought it would. Critics are really eating it up and really eating up Kristen Stewart's performance, but there's some debate about whether the film as a whole could appeal to the Academy, with many people saying it could do about on par with Jackie, possibly a little better, but it's hard to tell. Yeah, and then In the Heights is still in the top 10 because the cinematography in that was great, but we will see. We will see how well people remember it. I don't have much else to say on that category. Best Film Editing, Don't Look Up is in number 1 now, because I think that Adam McKay knows how to have very flashy editing in his films, and there was some talk with both Big Short and Vice as potential frontrunners in those separate years, and neither one of them won. Neither one of them won, so Don't Look Up, I think, is really going to contend for this award. And then Dune is a big, epic film that I imagine it's going to have some action scenes in it, so an easy number 2. Power of the Dog and Licorice Pizza and Nightmare Alley, just the big Best Picture contenders. Belfast is the one I have missing out, because Belfast feels like the Minari of the year, of like very well executed film, but like the editing doesn't stand out terribly well. But if it turns out to be like a big, big frontrunner to actually win Best Picture, then it could get on. But I don't think the editing in the movie is going to be as flashy as the above contenders. And although Coda is in number 10, even though that didn't have the flashiest editing either, but if that movie ends up being a big contender, then, well, anything can happen. I've said that multiple times, but, anything can happen if you let it. Best Adapted Screenplay. So I have Power of the Dog in the number 1 position, because this movie, we think, is going to be a pretty big deal. We also, as we'll get to later, we also have Coda in number 2. Having seen that film, I think that movie is going to really stick with voters, and the script is something that will definitely stick with people. Best Picture contender Dune, number 3. More of a tech player, but I think it should still get in for a screenplay. And Nightmare Alley, same thing at 4. Now, for the 5th slot, I have The Lost Daughter, which I don't have that movie for anywhere else in the top 5, but it's something. It won an award, I think, at Telluride for best screenplay, and I think that it feels like the type of movie that, from what I've heard about it, it seems interesting enough to be a lone screenplay nominee. But I don't know. And, I mean, let's look at the others. House of Gucci, interesting, and was, I think, number 1 for a while, but we're starting to realize that may be more of a commercial play, and with only a handful of nominations. Tragedy of Macbeth. Been a while since someone's got nominated for adapting Shakespeare. And that's the thing with Shakespeare. When people do Shakespeare movies or plays, like, you can do whatever you want with the visual style, but don't you dare alter a single word of the text. That's the big taboo thing right there. And I wish someone would do a straight Shakespeare adaptation where they translate Shakespeare's text into more modern English, but I don't think that's coming out anytime soon. And then The Humans stage adaptation, In the Heights and Passing. I don't really know what else to say about this category. It does seem like the less interesting category compared to original, and I think that's something we've noticed a lot more lately. The really interesting movies people are paying attention to are the ones that are original, but I think there's definitely enough good adapted screenplays here to make for an interesting lineup. Best Original Screenplay, we have Don't Look Up, now moved to the number 1 position with Licorice Pizza behind it. The reason I have Don't Look Up ahead in screenplay will become clear once I get to a picture, but I think both of those are going to be big contenders in screenplay as well as Belfast. Now, for the last couple of slots, Mass I still think is going to be a big above-the-line contender, though it doesn't have potential to do a lot of things below the line, and it hasn't been going to film festivals despite a very strong debut at Cannes, so hopefully this movie can still recover, but it's gonna be tough. And then Come On, Mike Mills, he got on for 20th Century Women, and people are saying very good things about this one. So, like in adapted screenplay, I do have this one lone screenplay nominee, and I think it's very possible that can happen. French Dispatch, I'm moving it out because people are kind of less enthusiastic about the film since it's premiered. Just that it's great production design, but not much more beyond that. And I don't think it's possible this gets in. It is an anthology film. It is considered lesser Wes Anderson, but it could do the same thing that Ballad of Buster Scruggs did for the Coens. Spencer, I think, is right on the edge of getting in. I don't really know if it's a screenplay type movie, but I think it could definitely contend. And then King Richard is there. I do have foreign language film contender The Worst Person in the World, which people seem to like. And then Being the Ricardos has moved down significantly. It is Aaron Sorkin. But, and here's the big but, we're starting to get to a point in the year where if a movie hasn't had a poster or trailer, it's going to start to look a little bit suspicious. And is this going to be ready in time? Because I kind of feel like we would have heard something about it if it was going to be ready in time. I'm not ready to officially move it out of my predictions, but if it is in the conversation, it's going to be a very late breaker, which could be beneficial, but I don't know. And I just don't know that many people that are really excited about it. People were not crazy about the casting when it was announced, so yes, it is Aaron Sorkin, so if it does come out this year, then it could really contend, but I just don't think it's happening, and I think the top 5 we have is a strong top 5. And with that out of the way, we move on to the acting categories. Now, the first thing I want to say right off the bat is I have noticed that there does seem to be a distinct lack of actors of color in the movies that are being nominated. They're not entirely gone. There are some actors of color that you're going to see mentioned, but for the most part, it seems to be we might be headed for another year of Oscars So White. Not entirely. I'm not entirely convinced that that's going to happen, but there could be something that comes out of nowhere, I keep telling myself. And I'm not trying to be actively racist in making these choices. But look at what other Oscar prognosticators are saying in terms of the type of movies that are getting good notices and could be nominated. There's just less, there's not as many options, it looks like, this year as there have been in years past. And maybe that's a shame. Maybe we just hit on a weak year for that, and next year it's going to be better. I certainly hope so. Or we could see a scenario in which people of color get nominated for performances that quality-wise maybe are not the best, but people feel the need to vote for them because of pure tokenism. And I'm treading shaky ground with that statement, and I apologize, but it just, ideally we can avoid another year of Oscars So White, especially after some of the triumphs that have been made in past years. With that out of the way, Ann Dowd is still in the number 1 spot for Mass because everyone who's seen that performance is saying it's incredible. Kristen Dunst may prove to be solid competition for Power of the Dog, but we will see. Marlene Matlin for Coda, I think, is still very much in the conversation. And then Frances McDormand for Tragedy of Macbeth is interesting because the role of Lady Macbeth is shaky between whether or not it's a lead performance or a supporting performance. And I've seen very mixed, I don't think anyone's really seen the movie yet, but it seems to be up for debate whether or not McDormand is going to go lead or supporting. And she is married to the director, which would imply that it would be lead. And yet, I've heard rumblings that this could go supporting, and for now I'm putting her in supporting, but anything could change by the time we see the movie. So then we have Meryl Streep for Don't Look Up, which I think, I've talked about this performance in the past, I think it's gonna be a thing where she's in just enough of the movie to make an impression and get that nomination, but because of who she is as an actress and because of how high profile the film is, it's gonna push her over the top and get her that nomination. But there's still gonna be people saying, I can't believe Meryl got nominated for so little screen time. And then Katriana Balf is someone who, again, straddles the line between lead or supporting, between what I've heard. I think that the true lead of Belfast is Jude Hill, who is the little boy, but being a child actor, I don't have him on the list. But I have everyone else in supporting, and so she could very, very easily get on. It's just because I think the top 5 is really crowded, and I don't want to bump out any of the top 5 to make room for Katriana Balf. And I didn't even mention Judy Dench. She was the grandmother in that movie and could contend, but the people who have seen that movie are more focused on Balf's performance than Dench. Ingenue Ellis for King Richard could contend if that movie is a big deal. Toni Collette, I had in lead for Nightmare Alley for a long time, but then looking at the trailer once again, now that came out, the trailer's definitely putting more emphasis on Blanchett, so I finally changed my mind and put Collette in supporting. Although, ironically, supporting feels a little bit more open, and I'm not sure if she could get on in supporting, whereas I think she had a stronger chance in lead. But we'll see. Jane Houdyshell reprising a Tony-winning role for The Humans, and then Olga Merediz reprising a Tony-nominated role for In the Heights. Again, if people are still talking about that movie, then her performance is one of the things that keeps getting highlighted, so it could happen. Best Supporting Actor. And I will say, for a while, this category was looking pretty sparse, and we are seeing it fill up a little bit. So, Bradley Cooper, I think, is definitely, he's far and away your frontrunner because of everything we hear about that role. Jason Isaacs, we're hearing great things about him, and he hasn't been nominated yet, so good for him. Richard Jenkins is something that people are really talking about that have seen The Humans, that his performance is really something special, it's in the race. Same with Tony Kutzer, and then Jamie Dornan seems like we gotta nominate someone from Belfast, and he seems like a good opportunity to do that. I do still have Leto almost getting on, because he came shockingly close for The Little Things, which was not a good movie. So, if he's campaigning for House of Gucci, it's very possible. And then Ciarán Hinds for Belfast, and I've heard early advance that if any of the male actors in Don't Look Up get on, it'll be Mark Rylance. Jesse Plemons, interestingly, is not getting a lot of standout notices for Power of the Dog, even though on paper he has a meaty role. So, and I am curious about that. And I needed someone for the 10th spot, and I heard good things about Richard E. Grant, and everybody's talking about Jamie, so I put him in that slot, even though Amazon, Apple TV, whichever one has it, is not doing a very good job of campaigning that movie. I don't really have much else to say outside of it's a good lineup. I did have Idris Elba for Harder They Fall initially, and then took him out because I think that movie's going to be more of a commercial play. Same thing with Oscar Isaac for Dune. It'd be great if someone from that movie could get acting recognition, but I think we'll have to wait till the movie comes out to see who, if anyone, is the standout of the cast. So now we come to lead actress, and yes, I do have Kristen Stewart in Spencer in the number 1 position, because everyone who sees the movie is like, Best Actress is over, she's winning. And I think that it could happen if the movie is as good as everyone says it is, and if her performance is as good as everyone says it is. She has, it's been a long time since Twilight, and since then she's done a lot of performances that have really gotten people's attention. And so this could be her real big movie for her to be like, haha, I told you naysayers I could act. I think it makes sense on paper. And then Jennifer Lawrence is number 2. Jessica Chastain is number 3, actually, to get her 3rd nomination for Eyes of Tammy Faye, because I've not seen it yet. I'm going to see it very soon, but her performance, from what I understand, is transformative in that one, so I think that could happen. Lady Gaga is one of the few nominations for House of Gucci I see it getting, but people really love Lady Gaga, and people really love that she's trying to be a serious actress, so I think that could really happen. And I think it makes sense. Emilia Jones, I think, is also really in contention for Coda, and I hope she's not the person that people are singling out from that movie, but I hope they continue to push her because she is very, very good. And then I have Olivia Coleman, number 6. I hear that her performance in that movie is amazing, but that the movie might not click with as many Academy voters as they were hoping for. So we will see what happens with that. And Cate Blanchett in Nightmare Alley, exactly what is the size of that role, and is that movie going to be a showcase for the actors at all, or is it just mostly a tech player? Jennifer Hudson, no one's really enthusiastic about that movie, but they are preparing to push her, so we will see. But I think that some of these other performances are going to knock her out of the conversation. Although, again, with what I was saying earlier about the race issue, that could be a factor in actually helping her getting her nominated. Same thing with Tessa Thompson in Passing, and Renate Vinciv in Worst Person in the World, not Dakota Johnson, despite a startling resemblance, but people do really seem to like that performance, so anything's possible. I did just barely leave off Penelope Cruz for Parallel Mothers, but Penelope Cruz is a great actress, and I thought she was extraordinary in Pain and Glory. So, anything, again, I keep saying anything's possible. It's not anything's possible. Okay. But things are starting to shape up. Even though I keep saying everything's possible, we are starting to get a clearer sense of what could happen. And that includes with Best Actor. Now, a lot of people are saying that this is going to be Will Smith. That he gives a very, very good performance in King Richard, and that movie is a crowd pleaser. But I'm not so sure I buy it, and the reason is no black actor has won a leading acting Oscar since 2006, and since then there have been a lot of close calls with Chadwick Boseman last year, and Denzel for Fences, and Viola Davis twice, and it's a real shame, but there always seems to be an excuse not to do it. And I would love it if Will Smith could win an Oscar this year, and I'm going to put him in the top 2. But right now I have Benedict Cumberbatch on the edge on number 1. He's getting very good notices for Power of the Dog, and people might like to give Benedict Cumberbatch an Oscar. It's close, and I'm going to be rooting for Will Smith, but I don't want to jinx him, that's all. I'm pessimistic because the Oscars always seem to find a reason to not give it to a leading black performance. And in that time, they've given it to so many supporting black performances. Quite a few of them border on category fraud, so it does really feel like... I'm not going to say more than that. DiCaprio's number 3... Denzel's number 4, both those performances are, I think, self-explanatory at this point. And then Peter Dinklage at number 5. He got very good notices out of Telluride, and he is one of those actors that it's surprising that he hasn't been nominated at this point, after he's gotten quite a few Emmys, and he's really, really well beloved. So I think it's time to get him a nomination. Even if the movie doesn't get anything else, I think there's enough goodwill for Peter Dinklage that he can make this nomination happen. And then outside of that, I have Cooper at number 6, but we don't know how well Nightmare Alley is going to do, and I think he's probably going to put a lot of his campaigning behind a Licorice Pizza. Joaquin Phoenix, I've heard some very good things about that film and that performance, but we'll see. And a lot of people just don't... I mean, Joaquin Phoenix is a great actor, but his behavior at award shows is not always the best, so we'll see. Maybe they don't want to invite him back. Cooper Hoffman We don't know how good of an actor he is, but like father, like son, maybe he could really contend. And then I still have Anthony Ramos and Nicolas Cage rounding out the top 10. Because, who knows, wild card. Best Director. So currently I have Jane Campion in the number 1 position for Power of the Dog. And I am predicting a split. I have, however, moved Paul Thomas Anderson out of the top 5. Because it's tough. It's a tight top 5. And I have him just missing for now, but it's going to be really interesting what happens with this final category. Campion, you know what? You see all the people that are there. Lorraine, Cian Heater, Ridley Scott, Almodovar could be the one token foreign language nominee, but because that seems to happen more often than not. But let's just talk about Best Picture, because this is what I really want to talk about. So, I have made the decision that I'm going to be predicting Don't Look Up to win Best Picture. And I had Licorice Pizza or Soggy Bottom in the top position for a long time, and it just felt like a placeholder to me. I was never fully buying it. And I am starting to buy Don't Look Up. Because Don't Look Up, what it has going against it is the fact that it's Netflix, and the fact that I don't know if it's going to be the best reviewed movies of the year. And Netflix, they've done well in getting in the Woods conversation, but they've never actually won Best Picture. And they have movies that look great on paper, like Roma, The Irishman, Marriage Story, Mank, and Trial of Chicago 7. Don't Look Up, I think, could be a big deal on paper because of what it's about and the fact that it's a very obvious metaphor for both climate change and anti-vaxxers and COVID deniers. I think it could be a film that really speaks to a lot of people, even though it's a comedy. So, like, makes people laugh, makes people have a good time, but still, like, gets people talking about these serious issues and, like, why we need to listen to science and not ignore it. I think that it could be a big contender. For the longest time, I had it as number 2, because I'm like, okay, everyone's going to be talking about this film, but how many people are going to be that passionate about it? But I'm starting to think it can actually happen because of where everyone's mindset is with the world and with Delta and with... We thought this was going to be the year we could all get back into the world, but no, because of anti-vaxxers, we're all still stuck in our houses. So, we'll have to see. Power of the Dog is number 2. And what I hear about this film is that the film, like, expects you to meet it halfway. It's something you have to think about and maybe give a second viewing to really appreciate what it's doing. And because of that, I'm not really sure it could win Best Picture. I think it could get a lot of votes and people could be passionate about it. But I feel like, having not seen the film, it feels like the type of film that's doing something different that people are not going to be fully prepared for. And it is probably going to be one of the best reviewed movies of the year, but is not going to be enough of a overall crowd pleaser to win. Although, speaking of crowd pleaser, Belfast, which just won the People's Choice Award at TIFF, is a big contender. I think it might be a little bit too simple and saccharine to win. There's no message. One of the things I'm looking for in a Best Picture winner is the message. What are we saying by giving this movie Best Picture? And I think of all of these nominees, Don't Look Up has the clearest message. This is what America is feeling right now. We need to start paying attention to science and start working together to combat these problems rather than denying that the problems exist. Dune, I think it's going to be a big tech player, but not the kind of movie that actually wins Best Picture because it's so genre. And then Licorice Pizza had it number 1 for a while under the name Saki Bottom. I just don't know. It's kind of a big question mark because we don't know that much about the movie. And I'm going to focus on Don't Look Up for now because we know more about it. But it always kind of felt like a placeholder, and the other movies seem more exciting. But we'll definitely, I think Licorice Pizza is still going to be a big, big contender. So then we have Coda, early release, but should hopefully maintain enough momentum, and we'll get a lot of campaigning behind it. Nightmare Alley looks like it's going to contend across the board. Mass is going to be tricky, but if we can keep it in the conversation and get people to actually see it, it should stay in the conversation because people say it's phenomenal. Spencer could go either way, to be honest. We'll have to see how the critics react to it and like how the televised awards react to it before we see what the Oscars are going to do. And then I do have King Richard at number 10, and it's worth pointing out that this year they are going for a straight 10 in Best Picture. I can see King Richard being nominated, and I was kind of debating this for a while because I'm like, are the reviews really that good? People are saying it's more like a general crowd pleaser. How well is it going to do with the Academy? But what pushed it over the line for me is the fact that it's really the only movie in the conversation right now that's starring people of color and about people of color. And I mean, you can point to In the Heights, which should have been in the conversation, but it's kind of being taken out of the conversation. And then Tragedy of Macbeth, which stars Denzel Washington, but I don't think is actively about race because the original Shakespeare text was not about that, and they're not altering that. So I think that King Richard could be a big deal just because it's hey, like, there's all these white movies, and then there's King Richard. So I think it'll get, and it's a crowd pleaser, and it's Will Smith, and Will Smith is charming his way on the campaign trail. So I do think it's going to get nominated, but it's going to be close. And I don't want a year where all 10 of the Best Picture nominees are about white people. So King Richard is probably going to contend based on that alone, although In the Heights or Tragedy Macbeth could also contend. House of Gucci, as I mentioned earlier, might still be a contender. We don't know. And then the other 2 slots they have are for Parallel Mothers and The Humans, which people seem to like well enough. But it's hard to really tell. Okay, so those are my Oscar predictions. I'll see you again, hopefully less than a month's time, to update you on these. I'll also have some more Pixels to Pictures coming your way, so stay tuned for that. Take care, everyone. Bye.